You don't want to just replicate what people did in Excel in a new tool. Otherwise, a lot of those same pain points will just come back and bite you in the butt again. We zoom out, we look at fundamentally what's the person trying to accomplish, what are their goals. Like a lot of times people will come to us because they've been doing a budget, just the company level, but now they have to do departmental budgets to hold teams accountable. And you have to slice by this dimension, do 5 or 10 slices of P&L plus the different roll-ups, but you don't have 5 to 10 times the amount of hours in the day. That's where a tech-enabled FP&A tool helps you out on this.
Hello and welcome to Tech for Finance, where we help finance professionals leverage technology to level up their lives. I'm your host, Adam Shulton, and today we're joined by Martin Zicc, CEO and co-founder of Jirav, a trailblazer in financial modeling and analytics. Martin's journey in finance has been remarkable, from his foundational experiences in accounting and financial management to leading roles in finance at several venture-backed companies. His knowledge in finance combined with a passion for technology led him to establish Jirav, where he's now significantly impacting how small and mid-sized businesses approach financial planning. When he's not building Jirav, he's a dad to 2 kids, a fan of Seattle sports teams, and also loves outdoor activities like hiking and snowboarding. But before we start, if you like what you hear today, make sure to subscribe to Tech for Finance on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. And don't forget to sign up to the free newsletter over at techforfinance.com. But it's great to have you on today, Martin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate the time. No worries. So before we started, you said your founder story was quite interesting. So I can't not ask that question. So over to you.
Yeah,
Tell us how it all got going.
I'm CEO, co-founder of Jirav, a company, we're a financial modeling and planning tool. And it's a complete misspelling of the word giraffe. You just kind of lift the V and then F together. So it's Jirav. And before this, I used to do fractional CFO work, and I've helped tech startup companies conceptualize their ideas. I've worked with all these brilliant product people, engineers, salespeople, to take their idea, put it into rows and columns and dollars and cents, and figure out like how big can this business get? How does it work? What are the levers on the business that we can do? So I got to do, you name it on the vertical, we probably did it at our firm. And by the time I raised venture capital for Jirav, that was the 17th time that I had raised in my career. So got to learn a lot. And from those learnings, a lot of that is kind of what's the inspiration as we built up this platform and put all those best practices in a code.
Very good. And you mentioned rounds of funding there. You've obviously been through that process quite a lot. Any sort of tips for people that are going through that process at the moment? Anything to focus on, anything to shortcut what I'm sure is sometimes a bit of a stressful process?
This market's a pretty tough one. We see the news about venture funding going down and all of that. I think even when markets were good, you had to do a lot more meetings than you normally think you have to do. I think when we did our seed round and we were just like an idea and a couple $1,000 in revenue, I think I did like 100 face-to-face meetings in 2 weeks, and I would just drive from coffee shop to coffee shop people. So if you're in the middle of that process, just, keep on grinding, have at it. And, once you get one believer, the rest will start snowballing in. And if you're in a later stage company, it is doable. There's tons of founders making it happen. If you're creating something valuable for your industry and your market, it's still happening there. It's just a little bit tougher right now.
Yeah, very good. Cool. So obviously focus of what you do is FP&A. So that financial planning piece. And there's a ton of information online, obviously, modeling in Excel and all that sort of stuff. And I don't want it to turn into an Excel bashing session. That's not what this is about, right? But I guess from your perspective, and you can talk around maybe some of the things that you're doing different at Jirav, is, when people think about FP&A, it is more than Excel, right? So how do people need to change that mindset And say for people that haven't got a background in FP&A, they might want to get into FP&A, what can they equip them with themselves? How can they think differently and not just think, right, well, I'll just do some models in Excel?
And then Excel is a great tool, and you can do a lot of stuff in there. But if you're working in FP&A, the end outcome that you want to achieve is being able to help your teams make smart decisions. And if you've done that successfully and quickly, you've succeeded as an FP&A person. You can do that on in a spreadsheet. You can do it in a purpose-built tool. You could draw it on a napkin if you can do the math. Great, you've done it. You can faster. It's even better. So I think every tool has its purpose, and there's different ways you can approach these things.
And you mentioned the fractional piece earlier. So in the position of a fractional CFO that's juggling multiple clients, I'm guessing data is an issue, right? Especially if you've got clients that send you data in Excel and that sort of stuff. Is it possible to continue doing stuff like that? Or is that a point where something like Jirav would come in to say, right, well, we can, because often with FP&A tools, it's done from a sort of business it's implemented in perspective, if that makes sense. Same with bookkeepers, I guess. There's not a lot of platforms that allow you to do that sort of multi-company management piece. Is that something that you've thought about, given your fractional CFO?
Yeah, the first part, you need to have your house in order. So having clean books is really important. If you're using QuickBooks or Xero, NetSuite, Sage Intacct, you've got to get the best, have that clean, because you can't build FP&A on top of a shaky foundation. So once that base is in there, tools like Jirav and others, we can bring in that data automatically and start, building your model. Think of your accounting system as almost like the backbone of your model that you will then start extrapolating out for your pro forma financial statements and any other kind of smaller models that might be feeding up into this main master model there.
And I've been having some discussions around this recently. So obviously, fractional CFO services, bookkeeping services, the people that runs those sorts of businesses are looking to scale and looking to provide more value, right? I guess maybe forgetting about systems for a second, I've been asked before, or I've had discussions before about companies that are able to deliver on the operational stuff. So, they can keep the books, and, they can make sure that, the reporting's done and all that sort of stuff. Do you have any recommendations for the insight that businesses are looking for from either a fractional CFO or even the internal accounts, right? What's that differentiator that maybe allows people to say, right, well, we've leveled up now. You're not just getting an operational person, you're getting some people that can serve you insight that you wouldn't otherwise have. What is your
I think
line of
the
thinking
really
there?
big one is a lot of times when people first try to do FP&A, they'll just take their numbers out of their income statement and then they'll say, okay, we're going to grow 50% this year, or we're going to grow 30%. And they just, put their finger in there and they're like, that's what smells right. But you can't magically grow revenue 50%. What actually has to occur is a series of actions that will occur in your business, and really being able to unpack the drivers of what's underlying those assumptions is really key. And when you unpack those drivers, that's like, there's an activity to this. And now you can start laying out the thought process. If we do A and B, and maybe there's a KPI C, which is some efficiency rate, then D will occur. And those kind of discussions and bringing them to light, making them really easy for especially the non-finance people to understand with this unpack there. That's kind of the first key step to making this easy and working with, all the different teams. And when you empower your teams that way so that they think about it as drivers for their different parts of the business, then you can just spin stuff up faster or slower based off of the resources you have, based off of people, maybe process improvements that you want to do in certain initiatives. That's where you start really creating value as an FP&A person. And, and you can do this in, if you're working in-house in FP&A at a regular company, or if you're a fractional CFO, you've got many clients that need to do this on that side.
So You talked about drivers there, and as I say in the podcast quite often, I don't have a financial background. I'm not a qualified accountant or anything like that. So pretend I'm an idiot, right? When we talk about drivers, there are some that are sort of generally considered, I guess. So staff changes, relating to headcount planning, external factors, currency rates, conversions, all of that sort of stuff. What are sort of hidden drivers? Is there anything sort of underneath that people might not immediately think is a driver that they can access in a tool or they can model for? Have you got any that you see come up that are maybe drivers that people hadn't really thought about before they started getting deeper
Yeah, I think
into FP&A?
a big one, obviously the headcount related ones is fairly straightforward. A lot of times when you're doing your operational expense planning, like 80% of your costs is people related, and a driver off of that. Your benefits is a function of how many people you have, your taxes is a function of salaries. And then when you're doing things like COGS is always a function of your customer unit economics that you have and your revenues. I think there's a lot of hidden ones underneath the revenue modeling side that can be very interesting though. And this is where a lot of times people need some help on like, how do you plan revenue? Cause it's so hard on, what is this sales goal we're going to have and how to unpack this? And I like to kind of unpack that by thinking, like I mentioned, if you've got a goal to grow a certain amount and you don't understand all the drivers to get there, think about here's where I am at point A. Here's where I am at point B. It's out here on the chart. Lay out on the, draw it out on a wall or in a list. What are all the activities that would have to occur to accomplish this? And kind of, and if you have to daisy chain them together, but like an example, you might have a sales goal and that might be a function of how many salespeople you have, and then they have a quota. Take a haircut off of that quota because there will actually be, there's just naturally turnover. And if you just say, hey, I've got 10 salespeople and they sell $1 million a year, that will be 10 million more in revenue. You're going to miss it 9 times out of 10. But if you take that haircut off of that, now you've got this driver for that. But then what's going to happen is really quickly, I've seen this commonly for a lot of companies, they'll take that sales forecast and they actually, what they don't think about is the lead gen. Do we have enough leads to feed all of these reps? And maybe actually it's right to scale down a sales team, or maybe you have enough where you can hire a few more. And if you start unpacking that, now you've got, a series of activities that your marketing team can start working against. And they know if I need to sell this amount of customers and this many units, over the course of a year, I need to get this much web traffic going on, and let's drive some activity on that. Those are the kind of strategic discussions that really help you start meeting these different plans. And when you unpack that extra layer underneath there.
It can be a nightmare though. So I've got a background in sales. So the whole marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead to opportunity type conversion stuff is part of my daily vernacular, if you like. But it's valid. But again, maybe you can shed some insight here, right? And I've seen some posts recently about it on LinkedIn in terms of the interplay between finance and sales. Not necessarily from a revenue planning perspective, but from maybe a sort of a bonus and commission perspective. So how can finance support sales in making sure that the comp plan and the bonuses are fit for purpose, that they keep people happy, obviously alongside budget and all of that sort of stuff. But ideally, whoever heads up sales needs to feed that information to finance in line with their experience of what they think likely conversion rates are, right? Does finance need to push hard on that? So you've said there, if we want to produce a proper model, we need pretty good data from that perspective, but sometimes sales is a bit wishy-washy, right? You don't necessarily have that clear cut stage by stage. So how much ownership do we think finance need to take in actually getting to
I think
those
there's
base
a
numbers?
big influence you can do, because the way you then structure it on the finance side can actually drive behavior on those sales teams. So if you're talking about comp plan stuff, even simple things like, do you incentivize people, for example, to get annual prepays versus month-to-month contracts? Maybe the annual prepays have a big discount, so some of the reps like having the month-to-month because they get, their quota set for as a function of, the annual recurring revenue or the total contract value. But it might actually be better to take a 20% haircut per customer if you could get it prepaid annually, at least for the business. That's something that the FP&A team can team up with the sales side, and be able to influence a lot of operations there. Because, if you get a bunch of prepays, maybe then you can get more money into leads to then get the reps actually more deals and make it better for them. That's, a simplified example of one that we see commonly day to day as people kind of think about, how they can influence comp plans.
And I'm guessing we're now at the point where we can model multiple scenarios, right? So this is if we did a load of prepay, that's then potentially how much cash we might have in the bank, so that we can then push that into marketing, as you've just said, in the way that you described it there. How do we make sure that we don't get fatigued? Whether it's a dedicated tool or whether it's Excel. So when we talk in terms of that, forecasting rhythm, obviously we need to get a balance. So, we don't just want to create one forecast, hang our hat on it, and then not touch it for however any months. But likewise, we don't want 100 different scenarios modeled that are difficult to communicate to people, and we can't necessarily, get across. Do you have any recommendations for that middle ground? Where is that?
Yeah, I actually see this all the time, because a lot of people will come to us where they'll say, hey, I built this Excel file and I've heard words like monster or zombie describing their Excel file, because every or mutant as well. There's some interesting ones, but and what happens is people take that Excel file and then people are like, hey, can I have another little analysis? Just this one little thing. They add another tab and they add another one. They Frankenstein this thing together, and then it becomes unmanageable. And I really help or advocate for people thinking about precision versus accuracy. And if you try to be too precise and you try to model every little line item so detailed, a lot of times you could do 20% of the work and be within 1% of the same forecast. By taking a second back, zooming out, and being like, all right, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Do we really need to model every one of our 100 employees' bonus plans one by one? Or can we just take the blended rate of what we did, apply that across all, and there's the goal. Now in 5 minutes, I did something that might've been a 2-day exercise somewhere else and accomplish the same thing. That's the kind of stuff that can fatigue people if they start getting into the precision side. And, when you're in a similar level of accuracy like that, and you've removed that fatigue to be able to keep things moving along, you start building this cadence in the business. And, every month you're closing the books, and say a lot of companies will do that annual operating plan. People will say they're successful if they do a quarterly reforecast as well. And so think you close the books out every quarter. Now you've got your annual plan. You've built up this rolling forecast. Many of our customers, because we made that actually so easy, where you just hit a little drop down and say, I have new actuals through X date, because it's all hooked up to all your different systems. Now they're doing monthly rolling forecasts, and they can, and when you start doing this and sharing that with your teams in an automated way, you set it up on Rails, it's like this heartbeat that starts occurring in the business, and you've built this muscle. And now, I don't know about you, but I get the dopamine hit of going through and rolling forward my forecast and hitting publish. And a CEO, I still do that in our app regularly. and that is just nerd like that for FP&A. But then when we share that out with that team and you start having these strategic discussions around, all right, we've got new data. It's actually, within this month's data, not a quarter old data. What can we go drive on the actions to go move the needle and like make this thing grow faster or to shift or whatever we want to accomplish? That's the fun stuff that then drives energy. And it all reduces fatigue and that's why we're here for that P&A side.
And so I love the fact that you said little dopamine hit there, which is great. I mean, it's nice to have that interactivity, I guess, to be able to see the way things change. But you've made the switch now from working in finance to now being in that CEO co-founder position. So if you think about yourself when you worked in finance and now you position yourself as CEO, have you got any advice to finance pros in terms of the way that they feed information to CEOs now that you are a CEO that you wish you'd known when you were still in finance? Have I worded that really badly?
No, it's all about storytelling. So I did a really good presentation at a couple conferences about financial storytelling and then you can, if you just put this big wall of numbers up on a slide or a spreadsheet, a lot of people, their eyes will cross and like, oh crap, like what do I do here? How do I interpret this? But if you can then from that highlight the punchline, like what are the 3 things that matter in this big report that I can drive action and activity off of? That helps the CEO so much because now they haven't gotten this, they've got the big report. They have the detail if they want to unpack something a little bit more, but they care about the results and how do we move this thing forward there? And the better and better that you get at financial storytelling and those drivers, once again, underneath the numbers, the more successful everyone's going to be. It makes your life easier as well as that receiver of the information's life easier.
And is there any data that is kind of more noise than value? So, is there information you're presented with on a frequent basis that you just don't care about, that you're like, no, we can cut that out straight away?
I think it depends on the business that you're in, on that side. And a lot of businesses are different, but I think, the key things that really matter the most, obviously, are like the things that are your drivers of growth. Are those dialed in correctly? And if not, you got to be watching that, very closely. Other ones like headcount related items, that's key. Are staffing run rates the right way? But, did someone turn in 2 expense reports instead of 1, or, all these little edge cases? Ignore that stuff. Put it in a footnote. People can read that there.
Yeah, so it's as you say, it's focusing on the more impactful stuff, I guess. Okay, fine. So taking a step back again, I think your words were, when people come to us, and use the example of, monster, zombie, Frankenstein spreadsheet or whatever it happens to be. What's the guidance that you tend to give if they're not in a good place? Yeah, so I know you said earlier, obviously you need to have that foundation right. You need to have data in one place. But is there any recurring themes that you tend to hear about when people come to you that you either think, no, that's not a good fit for using a tool, or you need to do this before you will get the best value out of the
what
tool?
What we'll do is a lot of times we'll unpack like what caused them to get to that point. And then from that, we want to many times avoid, you don't want to just replicate what people did in Excel in a new tool. Otherwise, a lot of those same pain points will just come back and bite you in the butt again. So we zoom out, we look at fundamentally what's the person trying to accomplish, what are their goals, where is their function need to go to as well? Are there new things that they haven't been able to report on? Like a lot of times, people come to us because they've been doing a budget at just the company level, but now they have to do departmental budgets to hold teams accountable. And you have to slice by this dimension, do 5 or 10 slices of P&L plus the different roll-ups, but you don't have 5 to 10 times the amount of hours in the day. That's where a tech-enabled FP&A tool helps you out on this. And we'll unpack those core outputs that they want to do, and then help guide them. And what we do is we've actually created this thing at Jirav called the Success Safari. So just love animals and safari stuff though. We actually bring people along this kind of best practice success stairway where you're going through the Success Safari, and it's a path of like, here's the best practices. And we've done this now, our publicly stated number, over 4,000 companies using the platform. We've seen what works and what doesn't work, and we've got these best practices. And if you follow us on that journey, we can make you pretty big successful in your current day job, as well as just make you look like a rock star for your career there at your company.
There we go. Who doesn't want to look like a rock star, right? So coming back to joining the dots then, so obviously we can suck in HR data from an HR platform. We can suck in, sales data from a CRM platform. Is there more advantage to connecting more systems in terms of the level of insight? Because some people might be thinking, right, well, we want to become more mature as an FP&A team, but at the moment we might not have a CRM system, or we might not have like a ton of data in the CRM system, for example, or we might have an HR platform, but we're only using it for like payroll, basic expenses at the moment. Are there still wins to be had, even if you don't have all singing and dancing systems to connect to in the wider business?
Just putting in the rigor to create a system of record for your forecast, that's already a win. That's the first one. Even if it's just accounting data and you're like, I'm going to formulaically build up my budgets now and, build this cadence of reviewing and checking it. So that's like, kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. Next one, you bring in that payroll data really quickly. It's, because that is such a high proportion of where your spend and your cash goes, a very fast win. And payroll data is actually great to bring into a model, because usually it's very clean, because if you're not running payroll right, you got bigger problems to solve there. So, so we find that to be, a very quick win that's very successful in helping you in that budgeting side. And now you're talking about, when do we hire, we've got Jane and Joe on this team. When do we hire another one of them? And you have that discussion. As you get into like the third leg of this, the customer data is really key once you start becoming a little bit more mature of the business. So the small ones, maybe you bring that in a simplified way. And then, as you mature, there's this whole kind of growth curve that you could say. And, it's very hard to jump from, the very bottom all the way to the super top level. You need to just kind of progress, and we'll meet you where you're at in that trajectory. And then eventually help you kind of grow and move along that way.
So coming, and I appreciate we're darting around, but there's stuff that kind of is fizzing in my mind as we go through these things. So going back to drivers, what's come back to me is what you were talking about, precision, accuracy, and that sort of stuff. So in terms of mapping, as you've said, we don't want to get to the point where we've a million drivers to manage, because of course some of them are going to be much more useful than others, right? But is there still value in trying to think about maybe as many drivers as we can, and then rank them, for example, and then speak to the team to say, look, this could be a potential driver, do we want to include it? Do we not want to include it? Is that a logical approach, or is that overcomplicating things? Do you just need to say, right, well, we've got 5 or 6 key drivers. We don't need to go through a complex problem, because those 5 or 6 drivers are going to account for the majority of the variance in our forecast.
I always try to push for simplicity first. It's so tempting to just go in at every single line item detail.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, actually, you have, if you built your chart of accounts the right way, you've got like a hierarchy in there. And there's usually, we found like most companies have like 7 or 8 kind of top level groups of things, staffing related, professional services and outside support, T&E facilities, discretionary marketing and so on. And, within that, it's, if you group it around those levels, you can start telling the story quickly and then unpack the things that are material, like really look at what's material. And do I really need to take, can I plan at this top level account, or do I need to unpack all 10 underneath there? And am I still going to get there? And, and like take a breath as you're going in and out before you dive in. Cause some people get the dopamine hit as well, doing every single little line item, but it can be a lot easier just doing it at that simpler level first to start.
Yeah. And I was going to say, because some people like can get really into the modeling, right? And as you say, it's almost powerful, isn't it? Where you can go in and say, look, I'm almost predicting the future. If we add in this variable, we can do this, and look at how this changes and all of that sort of stuff. And look how amazing I am with all of my Excel skills and all of the drivers. And again, I'm not trying to take the mickey or offend anyone here, but it is a trap that you can sometimes get caught into, isn't it? And immediately you've lost 2 days because you've had a bit of fun, playing with these different scenarios. So there's no point to that statement apart from, as you say, maybe just allot yourself a time span for getting the fundamentals sorted, and then try and cut yourself off when you feel like you're
exactly. Like weeds, right? I remember I've had several people even say like, they feel like an artist that's built up this massive Excel, and they're like, look at this thing. It's beautiful. Isn't it great? And then no one else in the company understands how it works. And if that's happening, you're not being successful. You need to build something that if you were to hand this off to someone else, could they actually understand what's going on? And if you've done that, like that's a successful model. So you got to I don't know if dumb it down is not the right term, but like simplify things and get a common denominator that will work both for the finance person trying to get the end output that they need, but that also works for the operational person. The person think about the person sitting across the table from you, and each of those departmental heads, is that, operations manager going to understand this when you ship that to them, or that VP of sales? Will they be able to, whip around a few assumptions and put in their sales forecast? Like, that's success on that side. And the more complex model can feel like you have job security because no one else can, take that away from you. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because you're just going to build yourself into this trap then.